Whenever I try to get anime watchers to read a manga, it can be a struggle. And I get it. Before you've really given the medium of manga a chance, it isn't hard to view it as nothing but an inferior version of anime. It lacks the motion, audio, color, and precise direction that anime has. And at the end of the day, they're different mediums, so a lot of the time comparison of them is completely unnecessary. Some stories work better as manga, and some work better as anime, but a certain manga makes the case for the medium much better than most I've read. And that story is Witch Hat Atelier. Now, Witch Hat Atelier is a fantasy story, one set in a relatively familiar world. You have magical beasts, witches wearing pointy hats, and normal humans with little knowledge of the goings-on of the magical world. It's a familiar setup, but when reading it, it jumps out at the reader immediately that this manga is gorgeous. And it's like, yeah, wow, a manga looks good. To be honest, the kinds of artists publishing manga these days, even in weekly magazines like Jump, have sort of devalued the raw power of a great art style. But what jumps out to me about Witch Hat Atelier is how painterly and beautiful it is even beyond its art. Panels themselves bend and sway and change material based on the going-on of the story itself. The art often spills out like the world is so much larger than the panels we're just using to peer into it. Text bubbles are carved out of the surrounding fire magic rather than floating above it, or cast bubbles on the world below them. Characters rest against and grab hold of the panels they sit inside. For perspective on just how incredible this manga is, it won an Eisner Award for the best US edition of Asian material. For some perspective on just how big a deal this award is, here are some of the other winners who've gotten it. Osamu Tezuka, Junji Ito, Naoki Urasawa, and literally Hayao Miyazaki. I mean, these are some of the biggest names in the industry, and that's not even counting the people who got nominated and didn't win. And yeah, a lot of the panels are your standard manga boxes, but it almost feels like Witch Hat Atelier is visually an art book first, and a manga second, which makes sense because its mangaka Kamome Shirahama is an illustrator who's worked for Marvel, DC, and Star Wars, and you can see this perspective as an illustrator just oozing through her paneling. A modern mangaka people love to praise, and rightly so, is Tatsuki Fujimoto of Chainsaw Man, Look Back, and Fire Punch. His approach to manga reflects his love of cinema. His panels look like pictures or freeze frames from a live-action recording. He achieves this through his posing and framing. His characters in motion have awkward poses, ugly expressions, and almost motion-blurred limbs while they're in motion. In the same vein, Witch Hat Atelier's world and characters, no matter what they're doing, look painterly, they look illustrated. Almost opposite to Fujimoto, characters in motion strike dramatic poses, surrounded by the most elegant magic you'll ever seen put to paper. At first glance, you might think, okay cool, this manga looks like an art book, but that doesn't mean it's any good to read. And yeah, that's a valid thing to think. Sometimes beautiful manga are not that good. But in a story set in such a fantastical world, with such an emphasis on art and the process of drawing and the beauty of magic within the story itself, the first step to selling that is being, well, beautiful. Imagine Dungeon Meshi if the food didn't look delicious, or Frieren if Fern hadn't visibly aged throughout the journey. Sure, these things don't technically directly aid their storytelling, but they're a part of selling the idea that the stories present to you. Also, I mean, it's just artistic. The whole point of art is to be moving, or at least memorable, right? Well, looking at these panels and these pages full of art that's more than just cool to look at, but genuinely movingly gorgeous illustrations, feels like I'm more than just reading a manga, but experiencing a genuine piece of art. It's such a lazy comparison, but when you watch a Ghibli movie, they take so much time just showing you the goings-on of their settings. These minor details may not directly move the plot, but they expand the world and help you, the viewer, believe that all the frankly ridiculous stuff you're being shown is real, or at least could exist in this world that you're being presented with. And it's the exact same phenomenon in Witch Hat Atelier. The manga looks magical and succeeds in making magic, the use of it, and the process of creating it look more appealing than pretty much anything I've ever seen before. For the first time in years, magic in a story felt truly magical while reading Witch Hat Atelier. And it's not just how intricate the system is, it's everything from its pretty curved panels to the fantastical pages displaying the spells themselves. It doesn't just feel like reading another manga, but truly peering into another world with its storybook-esque art style. And I know I just rambled about how the art improves the reading experience irrespective of the story itself, and this is technically unrelated to the direct topic of the video, but the story's great too, in case you were wondering. Anyway, it isn't that I think every manga needs to have this level of artistic detail, but when people talk about stories that can't be adapted, or what gives the medium of manga merit over anime, I point to stories like Witch Hat Atelier. With the anime looming on the horizon, I'm obviously excited to get to see what this world is going to look like in color and motion, but it'll never be a replacement for this manga. It'll never be able to capture the magic of turning the page onto a fantastical spread. It'll never capture the scale of the world breaking through the boxes designed to confine it. It'll never manage the constant artful posing and framing of its world and characters. There are so many aspects of the experience of reading Witch Hat Atelier that simply do not fit the medium of anime. And that, my dear viewer, is a sign of true mastery of one's medium. Do I think the anime will be bad? No, absolutely not. It's in great hands with Bug Films, especially if they don't have delays like they did with Zom 100. But if it wants even the slightest chance of living up to the remarkable manga it's adapting, it'll need to do a little bit more than just move the images and make noises. It'll have to master its own medium and tell the story in a completely new light. And I mean, to talk about Zom 100 again, Bug Films might really have it in them. Whilst we wait, you can go ahead and subscribe while I go finish that spell I was working on. Thanks for watching.